Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we're going to be continuing our series on the hypertrophy training guidelines, and this one is going to be on the shoulders. So first we need to establish the anatomy of the shoulder and what movements they produce in order to understand how we can best train the shoulders. So the muscles of the shoulders are going to be the deltoids, so the front, middle and rear deltoids, and we're also going to include the upper trapezius in this video. So the front, middle and rear deltoids are the three heads of these big round shoulder muscles here. So as the name suggests, the front deltoids are on the front, the middle are medial to the body, and then the rear are the backmost deltoid muscle. So although they're all technically the same muscle, they have the same attachment point, the origin, so where they start, is actually in different places. So they actually have slightly different actions just based on where they're located on the body. And that's important to understand because different exercises are going to emphasize different heads of the deltoid muscle. And then we also have the upper trapezius muscle, which this is the entire trapezius muscle here. However, as we can see, the fibers all run in all different directions. So the lower part of the trapezius, the fibers run from low to high, or high to low, however you want it, they're more vertical, whereas the middle part, the fibers run more lateral, so they run more horizontal, and then when we get to the upper trapezius again, they run more vertical, so they all have different actions. So we're going to be talking about in this video the upper trapezius, so sort of from the top of the shoulder here across to the spine and up, so this sort of triangle here, which is basically, if you look at someone from the front and you can see their upper trapezius, that's the part of the muscle we're talking about. The lower and middle part of the trapezius was covered in the back hypertrophy training guidelines video, which you can check out on the hypertrophy training guidelines playlist on this YouTube channel, if you want to have a look at that. So what movements do these muscles produce? And what movements can we do to train these muscles? So we have shoulder flexion and extension. So we have a look at this diagram here. If our arm is out straight in front of us, if we bring it up over our head, that's shoulder flexion. And then if we bring it back down behind our body, that's extension. So the front deltoids are going to do shoulder flexion, whereas the rear deltoids are going to do shoulder extension. So we actually have both of these movements, which is quite interesting because they're opposite. They're opposing movements. We also have shoulder abduction. So if we look here, basically if you have the arm by the side of the body, and you lift the arm up overhead from the side, that's shoulder abduction, and that's the primary function of the medial deltoid here, or the middle deltoid. We then have shoulder flexion and extension, horizontal flexion and extension, which is basically if we have the arm out in front of us, directly perpendicular to the ground, parallel to the ground, and we move our arm basically towards the middle of our body, so across our body, that's going to be horizontal flexion. And then horizontal extension is when we do the same thing, but we move it away from the body. So if we have the arm out straight in front of us again, parallel with the ground, and we move it towards the same side that arm is on, that's going to be shoulder horizontal extension. So again, it's basically the same movement as shoulder flexion and extension, but our arm's just in a different position. However, the muscles pretty much do the same movements, whether it's horizontal or in neutral flexion. So the front deltoids are going to do the horizontal flexion, whereas the rear deltoids are going to do the horizontal extension. Not that it matters specifically, but it's good to understand the exact function and anatomy of each muscle. We then have scapular elevation and retraction, and this is going to be more the function of the trapezius muscle here. So these upper fibers, some of them will produce some retraction, but most of them are going to produce scapular elevation. So you imagine shrugging your shoulders here, and the scapula goes up. That's what the upper trapezius is. That's going to be their main function, and a little bit of retraction as well. However, the middle part of the trapezius is more has more of a function in scapular retraction. So an interesting question to raise before we get into the specifics is how much shoulder training do we actually need to do? Because other compound exercises are actually going to involve the shoulder muscles already. So do we actually need to do any direct training for our shoulders? So for example, pushing exercises are going to involve the front delts pretty heavily, and pulling exercises are going to involve the rear delts pretty heavily. So pushing exercises, something like a bench press, push-ups, dips, etc., are going to primarily use the front delts. Pulling exercises like seated row, bent rows, those sort of rowing exercises are going to involve the rear delts pretty heavily. And then we have exercises like deadlifts or some sort of pull, and then some particular rows are actually going to have, involve the upper trapezius a little bit. Maybe not quite to its full extent, but it still will involve the trapezius muscle. So extra shoulder training will help to grow those muscles, but it's not fundamental, because as long as we have all these main compound exercises in our program, we can probably get pretty good shoulder growth without actually having to do any direct training for it. However, we can perform more training for our shoulders, direct training, if our shoulders are particularly lagging, or maybe our traps, for example, are lagging. So any part of our shoulder that's particularly lagging, we may want to actually perform a little bit of extra direct shoulder training. So what exercises are going to involve the shoulder muscles and help us grow? So the compound lifts are going to be the best as usual. So things like barbell overhead press, dumbbell overhead press, behind the neck press, and upright row. All these exercises are going to use pretty much all of those shoulder muscles. So it's going to hit the front delts and medial delts pretty good, as well as the upper traps quite good. However, the rear delts may not get quite the same. Maybe with upright rows they will, but with these exercises they probably won't actually get maybe enough. If that's a particular lagging body part, you may not get enough stimulus from some of these. So then we have some accessory exercise we can do if any particular part of the shoulder is not actually growing at the rate that is desired. So lateral raises with dumbbells, or you can do that with cables as well. They're going to pretty much primarily emphasize the middle delts, the middle deltoids. Shrugs, both with dumbbells and with barbells, are going to hit the upper traps pretty well, because it has that scapular elevation movement to it. So any sort of shrug variation, even machine type shrugs could work. And one thing that's important to do with shrugs is to make sure we get that full shoulder elevation, but we also get a little bit of retraction as well. So at the bottom, let your shoulders slump forward and down, and then when we come up, we want to squeeze them back and up. That's going to fully activate those upper trap muscles. We can then have things like reverse flies, which we can do with dumbbells or with cables again, and that's going to pretty much emphasize mainly the posterior deltoids and a little bit of the traps as well. So how would a shoulder program look on paper? So we would again have the shoulder exercises usually in the same day as we probably would have other exercises. So probably on a pressing day we could do some of these shoulder exercises, and then maybe potentially we may even have something like shrugs or reverse flies or something on more of a pulling type day. So we might do a barbell overhead press as the main heavy compound exercise, but maybe if our upper traps are lagging somewhat or we want more growth in there, we might include also dumbbell shrugs in there. So we'll pick those two exercises. That should be sufficient with all our other heavy compound lifts that we're doing throughout the training week. 4 sets of 8, slightly heavier on the compound exercises, and 4 sets of 12 on the shrugs with appropriate loads. And then if we undulate it with another day, so we hit it twice throughout the week, so Monday and Friday, maybe we'll do the same exercises, but this time we'll vary the rep range and the loads used. So we'll have slightly lighter loads, but also slightly more reps and a little bit more volume in there. And same thing with the shrugs, slightly higher reps, but drop the load down a little bit. That's it for this presentation, guys. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of it. Make sure to check out the other hypertrophy training guidelines in the Hypertrophy Training Guideline playlist on this YouTube channel. If you're a curious individual who's interested in learning more about sports performance training, you can find Flow High Performance on Facebook and on Instagram. On these platforms, you'll find hundreds of these research infographics, which are the latest research summarized into these easy to understand pictures so that you can stay up to date with the latest research without actually having to go into the journal yourself and reading the entire article.